We have just completed the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix for 2022 in Jeddah. So let's get stuck straight in, shall we? Even before the weekend kicked off, during practice, we did see a big news story pop up at the track, and it was due to a missile strike just a few miles away from the Grand Prix itself. This facilitated very relevant questions regarding safety and also led to a 4-hour drivers meeting regarding continuing the race. Ultimately, they did decide to continue, the teams decided to continue, the FIA decided to continue, but there was ongoing questions surrounding the safety of the race and whether we should still be racing there at all, which I think is a good question and perhaps a question for another video. Back to the weekend though, we did see Hulkenberg back in the car for the second week in a row. Vettel still hasn't tested negative from his COVID spell yet, so he was not able to take part in the weekend. But now that we've got a couple weeks break going to the next race, he should be able to get back fighting fit, hopefully anyway. In qualifying, we started off with a big crash for Nicholas Latifi in Q1. That caused a red flag. We also saw Tsunoda not run at all due to a cooling system issue with his car. Again, very disappointing for him, but it's still early in the season. We're still working out the kinks in these cars for sure. And then we saw a huge shock. Lewis Hamilton went out in Q1. That's the first time since 2017 he was 6/10 down on his teammate George Russell. So big shock there. The team said it was all down to setup and the lead failed him. So big shock there. Out in Q1 we had Tsunoda who didn't run, Latifi who had that crash, Hulkenberg, Albon and Hamilton. Then in Q2 we had a monster crash, absolutely huge, and another red flag, this time for Schumacher. It was a real shame, he was having a really good session and ahead of his teammate Magnussen in a lot of it. But it did result in an hour delay while they took quite a bit of time extracting him from the car, taking him straight to the ambulance. The good news is there was no visible injuries, he was taken to hospital for scans, and he's since come back and said he is fine. So ultimately, good news, he is safe, and the car did its job at protecting the driver in a 160-mile-an-hour crash. It's insane to think about, but I'm glad he's alright. When we did get going, we saw Norris, Ricciardo, Zhou, Schumacher obviously, and Stroll go out in Q2. So again, both McLarens out in Q2. They're not going to be too happy about that. But that did mean that we saw Bottas and Magnussen make it into Q3 for the second week in a row, proving that first race was no fluke for them. What a result, especially for Bottas keeping his streak alive, eh? In the end, we had Perez qualify on pole. I can't believe that's his first ever pole position. 215 odd races, I think they said. What a result. Leclerc came in second, Sainz in third, and Verstappen down in fourth. So it looked to be a straight fight between the Red Bulls and the Ferraris once again. We had a good showing from Alpine, 5th and 7th for them. That was strong. And we also heard after qualifying that Ricciardo was giving a 3-place grid penalty for impeding Ocon. Thankfully, that didn't hurt where Ocon landed. He managed to get another lap in and he was fine. I don't know why they wait until after to hand out those penalties because, I mean, if Ocon didn't get a second run in and Ricciardo got through at his expense or whatever, then what do you do then? So weird. But anyway, on to the race. And we had early drama as on the way to the grid, not even on the formation lap, Tsunoda broke down with an engine issue and wouldn't be able to take part in the race. This kicked off the question of, will there be any more questions surrounding this Red Bull engine throughout the race again? Of course, there was no start for Schumacher either, so 2 drivers out of the race before it's even got started. The majority of the field started on mediums, except Magnussen, Hulkenberg and Hamilton, who started on the hards. When we got underway, everyone had a very clean start, very impressive to see, especially on a street circuit like this. Verstappen took Sainz off the line, so he's up to third right away. Gasly struggled early on, losing places to both Magnussen and Norris. That was a bit of a surprise, especially with Magnussen as well. Magnussen was on the hard tyre, Gasly was on the medium. So you'd think theoretically Gasly could warm his tyres up faster, but that was not the case. Zhou dropped to the back of the grid, another poor start, and it's exactly the same thing that affected him last time out. There is something wrong with that car at the race starts. It didn't hit Bottas this time, but it did hit Zhou, and he dropped all the way to the back. It seems like his car goes into anti-stall for some reason. In the early stages of the race, we saw a brilliant battle between Alonso and Ocon. It lasted what felt like forever. It was like 5 or 6 laps. It was fantastic where they were just fighting each other. And Sky actually brought on Otmar Safnauer, the team principal of Alpine, and were like, hey, are your guys allowed to race? Is this okay? And he was like, yeah, sure. They can race. We'll settle them down later. And so that's brilliant. And Jensen Button, who was also doing commentary, was like, thank you for that. That's brilliant. Because they provided us some brilliant racing. They were very respectful of each other, but they did go hard, and it was really great to see. The regs were really working because they were able to follow each other super close for multiple laps, and it was just great. It was great stuff. During that time as well, we also saw Hamilton and Zhou just gently make their way up the field, like picking off one person every couple of laps, just gently bringing themselves up the field. Obviously, both those cars were kind of out of position. Obviously, Hamilton in the Mercedes, that's like a 5th place car at this point, so, and he was starting in like 15th, so he was making his way up. Zhou obviously dropped to the back, so he was making his way up through the field, but he did end up getting a 5-second penalty for leaving the track and gaining advantage. That's a shame, but it gets worse for him. They never actually served the penalty. He did come into his box to serve it, but then the jackmen got confused and then they serviced him without the 5 seconds being done. Oh, it's just a huge mistake by the team. And as a result, he got a drive-through penalty because he did not serve a full 5-second penalty. A huge mistake by the team that cost their rookie points. Our first round of pit stops started around lap 14 with Stroll and Albon pitting in. They both came in and went to the hard tyres that would go to the end of the race. Ferrari kind of pulled a smart bluff on Red Bull for their pit stop on lap 16. So Leclerc came on the radio saying, I want to undercut him, let's undercut him. And then of course Red Bull reacted by pitting Perez immediately so he couldn't be undercut. This was on lap 16. So Leclerc just stayed out and took the lead of the race. Perez exited in 5th in the end on his new hard tyres, but then unbelievable bad luck for Sergio Perez. 1 lap later, literally just 1 lap later, Latifi crashes into the wall, and that resulted in a safety car. Of course, at that point, everyone who hadn't pitted now pitted, because under a safety car, your time drops dramatically, the amount of time it takes to do a pit stop. So, of course, that really damages Perez. He took the full stop, the full time to take a pit stop, whereas Leclerc can come in half the time and make his pit stop. This initially dropped Perez down to 3rd behind Leclerc and Verstappen, but as we saw later, he actually overtook Sainz under safety car conditions as Sainz exited the pits. So he had to hand that place back. So Perez effectively down to 4th because of a pit stop that was 1 lap too early. The safety car also made changes down the field as well. We saw the hard tyre runners, Magnussen, Hamilton, Hülkenberg, and also Ricciardo, who'd already stopped for hard tyres. They all stayed out, so they all gained places whilst the others around them pitted. They stayed out and, jumped up the order. Once the safety car came in, Leclerc got away well and kept Verstappen behind. Perez, like I said, had to give that place back to Sainz. So the top 3 from now, Leclerc, Verstappen and Sainz. Both Mercedes had a really good fight with Magnussen. Actually, Mercedes fighting Haas. It's brilliant to watch. And it's something I never thought I'd say. That was for 5th, 6th and 7th on the restart. Both Mercedes, both Russell and Hamilton managed to get past Magnussen in the end. And then Magnussen had a really great battle with Alonso as well, which lasted a couple of laps. It's just fantastic, the amount of fighting we're having this season, particularly Magnussen getting into scraps everywhere. The real shame, though, is that Alonso, after having this battle with Magnussen and beating him, had a mechanical failure and he had to limp back to the pits on lap 36. And then something strange started happening. The very same lap, Ricciardo ground to a halt out on track right by the pit entrance as well. And then on the very same lap, Bottas also retired his car in the pit lane. What was going on that lap? Nobody pointed out that we had 3 cars retire with mechanical difficulties on the exact same lap. And they all had different engine types, so we can't even blame it on one engine. There's a Mercedes engine, there's a Ferrari engine, and there's a Renault engine among all of that group. So I don't know what was going on then, but it was an eventful lap, that's for sure. Due to the placement of the cars, particularly Ricciardo and Alonso, as they were pushed down the pit lane, it meant the pit lane was closed and the virtual safety car deployed. This really hurt Hamilton as he was looking to dive into the pits under a safety car to get a nice cheap stop, because at this point he had not pitted and we were quickly running to the end of the race and he had to pit one more time. You have to use 2 compounds of tyre. He'd so far only used 1 hard tyre, so he needed to use either the medium or the soft at some point in the race, which he'd not yet done. On lap 41 we went racing again and we had 9 laps to do it in. Hamilton immediately pitted and that sadly dropped him back to 12th place. He didn't get his cheap pit stop and it meant he'd have to fight up the order again. From here on in, I think for the whole rest of the race, eyes were glued to Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. They had a ding-dong battle that lasted the entirety of those 9 laps. It was amazing. It felt like they were battling forever, with Verstappen overtaking and then Leclerc taking it back and then them leading nose to tail around the entire lap. Oh, it was just beautiful racing, beautiful stuff. Verstappen did finally take the lead and make it stick on lap 47 with 3 laps to go. I thought we were going to see some late drama again, but it turned out not to be the case. Stroll and Albon collided with 1 lap to go. The steward said that will be reviewed after the race. It didn't really affect too much. The Leclerc-Verstappen battle did continue as Leclerc pretty much pushed Verstappen over the line in the end. But Verstappen wins, Leclerc comes in second, and Sainz is the one that takes the final podium spot. What a race. It was very entertaining. It was chock full of action, just like the first race. I think we're on to a bit of a winner with these regulations, I really do. Norris came home to secure McLaren's first points of the season. He actually had a bit of a drag race right at the end with Ocon. He came home in 7th in the end. Magnussen once again gets points for Haas. Can't believe it. They're doing so well this season. Good on them. And Hamilton even snagged a point as well. He finished 10th in the end. Leclerc retains his spot at the top of the championship for now. He got the fastest lap, so a +1 point for him as well. But this was a pretty good race actually. It was less messy than I anticipated, and it turned out to be just brilliant with the close racing, plenty of overtakes. Even though it was a street race, we did see a lot of overtakes, which is always one of the complaints about racing on street tracks is they tend to be pretty processional and we don't get a lot of overtakes. We did see that this time out and it was great. Really, really good. A very intense track and quite tough on the drivers as well, I think. We saw them coming out of the cars, super sweaty, super down on energy. And we also saw him going into the race quite banged up as well. I saw multiple drivers strapped up with KT tape on their necks, which is not something we see very often. So this track must take it out of them. In the preview, I did give my driver to watch to Sainz. I wanted to see if he could match Leclerc's pace. Maybe Bahrain was a one-off. That wasn't the case this time out though. He was not able to hang on to Leclerc once again, which is a bit of a shame. Hopefully he can correct that as we go on in the season. My team to watch I gave to Alfa Romeo. I was really kind of curious about what speed and pace that car had because it looks fast. It looks really, really fast. But this was not the race for them. Bottas was running very well. Zhou was not, as we know. He had a poor start once again, which they really, really need to correct. And then Bottas retired. Then they fumbled Joe's penalty, so it's just a terrible race for them, honestly. It didn't go well. I think that car has a lot in it. They just need to string it all together. They need to work out these reliability problems. Then I think they've got a really good chance of securing some big points. And it's a shame we didn't get to see that from them this weekend. But anyway, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Let me know on social media over at Race Report Pod. And I will catch you in the next one.